What you're about to witness defies everything experts thought they knew about animal behavior. A war veteran's rescued dog becomes a mother to two orphaned leopard cubs, creating a bond so powerful it will challenge your understanding of love itself. The morning fog rolled across the remote hills of northern Kenya when Marcus Sullivan first heard the desperate cries echoing through the valley. The 34-year-old former Marine had come to this isolated region 6 months ago seeking solitude after 3 tours in Afghanistan left him struggling with memories he couldn't shake. His only companion was Bella, a German Shepherd mix he'd rescued from the streets of Nairobi after she'd been hit by a truck and left with a permanent limp. Marcus had chosen this secluded area specifically because it was far from people, far from the noise and chaos that triggered his nightmares. He'd built a small cabin on the edge of what locals called the Forgotten Valley, a place where wildlife corridors connected several national parks but received little human attention. It was supposed to be peaceful, a place where he could work on healing both himself and Bella. That morning started like any other. Marcus was repairing solar panels on his cabin roof when Bella's behavior changed dramatically. The normally calm dog began whimpering and pacing frantically, her ears pinned back in distress. She kept running toward the dense acacia forest that bordered his property, then returning to Marcus as if trying to communicate something urgent. The crying sounds grew louder, high-pitched cries that seemed to come from deep within the forest. Marcus had heard enough animal sounds during his time in the wilderness to know this wasn't normal bird or monkey chatter. These were distress calls, the kind that spoke of abandonment and fear. Bella's agitation intensified with each passing minute, her maternal instincts clearly triggered by whatever was making those sounds. Against his better judgment, Marcus decided to investigate. He'd learned to trust Bella's instincts during their months together. She seemed to understand his own struggles with isolation and had never led him astray. Grabbing his first aid kit and some emergency supplies, Marcus followed Bella into the forest, unprepared for what they would discover in a small clearing just half a mile from his cabin. 2 tiny leopard cubs, barely 3 weeks old, lay huddled beneath a fallen log. Their eyes were barely open, their spotted coats matted with dirt and dried blood. There was no sign of their mother anywhere, and the cubs were clearly in critical condition. Marcus knelt beside the cubs, his military medical training kicking in as he assessed their condition. Both cubs were severely dehydrated, their tiny bodies trembling with weakness. The smaller of the two had a deep gash across its shoulder, likely from whatever had separated them from their mother. Fresh leopard tracks around the area told a grim story, but they were at least 2 days old and led nowhere. In East Africa, leopard cubs face mortality rates exceeding 70% in their first year, even under normal circumstances. According to wildlife biologists, cubs this young require their mother's milk every 2 to 3 hours and cannot regulate their own body temperature. Without immediate intervention, these cubs had perhaps 12 hours before organ failure would set in. Leopard mothers rarely abandon healthy cubs unless extreme circumstances force the separation. The most likely scenarios were human-wildlife conflict, territorial disputes with other predators, or poaching activity. Kenya's leopard population had declined by 30% over the past decade due to habitat loss and illegal hunting. Mother leopards were often killed by farmers protecting livestock, leaving cubs to starve in the wilderness. What made this situation even more challenging was the location. Marcus was over 6 hours from the nearest wildlife rehabilitation center, and his old pickup truck had been having engine problems for weeks. The rough terrain and unreliable roads meant any attempt to transport the cubs would likely result in their deaths before reaching professional help. Bella approached the cubs cautiously, her nose twitching as she caught their scent. Her behavior was remarkable. Instead of showing the predatory interest that dogs typically display toward small animals, she exhibited clear signs of maternal concern. Her ears were forward, her posture protective rather than aggressive. She began making soft whining sounds, the same vocalizations she'd used when Marcus found her injured on the streets. Research from the University of Nairobi had documented cases of cross-species adoption in extreme circumstances, but these were exceptionally rare and typically involved animals in captivity. Wild canines and felines were natural competitors. Their evolutionary history marked by territorial conflicts and resource competition. The hormonal and behavioral mechanisms that trigger maternal care in mammals are highly species-specific, making successful cross-species bonding nearly impossible under normal conditions. Marcus faced an impossible decision: leave the cubs to die naturally, attempt a dangerous journey to professional help, or try something that every expert would call foolish. Bella continued her gentle vocalizations toward the cubs, as if making her own preference clear. As Marcus contemplated his options, a distant sound made his blood run cold. The unmistakable crack of rifle fire echoed across the valley, followed by the rumble of vehicles moving through the forest. He recognized those sounds from his military service. This wasn't recreational hunting or wildlife management. This was something far more dangerous. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Local rangers had been tracking a notorious poaching syndicate for months. The group, led by a man known only as Daktari, had been systematically targeting big cats across the region. Leopard skins could fetch up to $15,000 on the black market, while bones and other body parts were smuggled to Asian markets for traditional medicine. Intelligence reports suggested the group had killed at least 12 leopards in the past 6 weeks. The timing of the cubs' abandonment suddenly made horrific sense. Their mother had likely been killed by these same poachers, either for her valuable pelt or because she posed a threat while defending her young. The cubs had somehow managed to escape or hide during the attack, but without their mother's protection and nourishment, they were as good as dead. Marcus's hands began to shake, not from the cold morning air, but from memories that the gunfire had triggered. Images of his last patrol in Afghanistan flashed through his mind. The ambush that had killed 2 of his unit members, the helpless feeling of watching his teammates die while he could do nothing to save them. The familiar weight of survivor's guilt pressed down on his chest, making it difficult to breathe. But this time was different. This time he wasn't powerless. These cubs weren't his fallen comrades, but they represented something he could actually save. The parallel wasn't lost on him. 2 vulnerable lives abandoned by circumstances beyond their control, facing certain death without intervention. Bella seemed to sense his internal struggle. She moved closer to the cubs and lay down beside them, her body heat providing the warmth they desperately needed. One of the cubs, responding to her presence, attempted to crawl toward her. It was a pitiful sight. The tiny predator, barely larger than a house cat, seeking comfort from the species that should have been its natural enemy. The sound of vehicles grew closer. Marcus realized that staying in this area much longer could put all of them in danger. Poaching syndicates were known to eliminate witnesses, and his isolated location made him an easy target. He needed to make a decision quickly before the choice was taken away from him entirely. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. He couldn't save his fallen brothers in Afghanistan, but he could save these cubs. The military had taught him to adapt and overcome impossible situations, and his months of isolation had given him something most people lacked: time, patience, and a deep understanding of what it meant to survive against all odds. His plan defied conventional wisdom about wildlife rehabilitation. Instead of attempting the dangerous journey to professional facilities, Marcus decided to create a controlled environment at his cabin. He had medical supplies from his military days, a generator for consistent power, and most importantly, Bella's unexpected maternal response to the cubs. Dogs and leopards shared common mammalian biology when it came to nursing and maternal care. Both species relied on similar hormonal cascades involving oxytocin and prolactin during the bonding process. If Bella had recently given birth herself, cross-species nursing might have been possible, but she hadn't been pregnant. However, Marcus had read about induced lactation in emergency veterinary situations. During his combat medic training, he learned that mammals could sometimes be stimulated to produce milk through hormonal triggers and consistent stimulation, even without pregnancy. It was a long shot, but not impossible with the right approach and supplementation. His military background had taught him to think systematically about complex problems. The cubs needed three critical things: nutrition, warmth, and emotional bonding for proper psychological development. Marcus could provide supplemental nutrition through specialized formula feeding every 2 hours. His cabin's heating system could maintain optimal temperature, but only Bella could provide the bonding component that would give these cubs the social development they needed to survive. Marcus carefully gathered the cubs, noting their shallow breathing and weak responses. The larger cub, which he mentally designated as the male based on size, weighed approximately 2 pounds. The smaller one, likely female, was barely 1.5 pounds. Both were critically underweight for their estimated age of 3 weeks. Working quickly but gently, he fashioned a carrying sling from his military jacket. Bella stayed close throughout the process, her protective instincts fully engaged. As they made their way back toward the cabin, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since his military service, a sense of mission purpose that went beyond his own survival and healing. Back at the cabin, Marcus transformed his living room into an improvised wildlife nursery. He cleared a corner near the fireplace, laying down thick blankets and towels to create a warm, soft environment. Using his camping gear, he rigged up infrared heat lamps to maintain a constant temperature of 85 degrees Fahrenheit, critical for cubs who couldn't yet regulate their own heat body. Bella watched his every movement with intense focus, occasionally whimpering softly as if offering suggestions. When Marcus gently placed the cubs on the makeshift bedding, something extraordinary happened. Without any prompting or encouragement, Bella approached slowly and carefully positioned herself next to them, curling her body in a protective arc around both cubs. The moment felt suspended in time. Marcus held his breath, uncertain whether Bella's instincts would shift toward protection or predation. These were, after all, natural competitors in the wild. Every evolutionary instinct should have triggered aggressive behavior toward these small felines. Instead, Bella began the gentle licking motion that mother dogs use to stimulate breathing and circulation in newborn puppies. Her tongue, rough but careful, cleaned the matted fur around the cubs' faces and bodies. The larger cub responded immediately, making tiny mewing sounds and attempting to nuzzle closer to Bella's warmth. Marcus quickly prepared an emergency feeding solution, using powdered goat milk, corn syrup for immediate energy, and a small amount of cream to replicate the fat content of leopard milk. Using a syringe without the needle, he attempted to feed the cubs drop by drop. The process was painstakingly slow. Each cub could only manage a few milliliters at a time without choking. The smaller female cub was particularly weak, barely able to swallow. Marcus feared she might not survive the next few hours. But as he worked to feed her, Bella moved closer, positioning herself so the cub could feel her heartbeat and breathing rhythm. The combination of Bella's presence and the gradual nutrition intake seemed to stabilize the tiny leopard's condition. Hours passed in careful, methodical care. Marcus fed the cubs every 90 minutes, monitoring their breathing, checking for signs of hypothermia, and documenting their responses in a notebook. Bella remained vigilant throughout, occasionally shifting position to ensure both cubs stayed warm, but never leaving their side. By evening, both cubs had managed to consume several milliliters of formula, and their breathing had become more regular and strong. Over the following weeks, an unprecedented transformation unfolded within the walls of Marcus's remote cabin. The cubs, whom he named Koda and Zara after Swahili words meaning survivor and flower, began to thrive under Bella's unwavering care. What started as emergency intervention evolved into something that challenged every assumption about interspecies relationships. Bella's maternal instincts intensified with each passing day. She developed a feeding schedule more precise than any alarm clock, gently nudging Marcus awake every 2 hours for the cubs' formula feedings. During these sessions, she would position herself so both cubs could nestle against her warm belly, providing comfort while Marcus administered their bottles. Her protective behavior extended beyond mere tolerance. She actively participated in their care. The most remarkable development occurred during the 3rd week. Bella began producing small amounts of milk, triggered by the constant stimulation and her body's hormonal response to the cub's presence. While not enough to fully nourish 2 growing leopards, her milk provided crucial antibodies and immune factors that supplemental formula couldn't replicate. Marcus documented this phenomenon meticulously, knowing that veterinary science had few recorded cases of such cross-species-induced lactation. Koda, the larger male cub, developed quickly under this care regimen. His eyes opened fully, revealing bright amber irises that tracked movement with increasing alertness. He gained weight steadily, his spotted coat becoming lustrous and thick. More importantly, he began exhibiting normal leopard behaviors: playful pouncing, mock stalking, and the distinctive vocalizations that would eventually become his adult roar. Zara proved more delicate, but equally responsive to Bella's nurturing. The female cub formed an especially strong attachment to her adopted mother, often sleeping draped across Bella's back or nestled beneath her chin. Her smaller size made her more dependent on warmth and frequent feeding, requirements that Bella seemed to understand instinctively. Marcus found himself healing in unexpected ways as he watched this unlikely family bond. The routine of caring for the cubs provided structure to his days, while their playful antics gradually replaced his nightmares with moments of genuine laughter. Bella's transformation from a wounded street dog to a devoted mother mirrored his own journey from damaged veteran to purposeful caregiver. By the 6th week, both cubs had tripled their original weight. They moved with increasing coordination, exploring their confined space with natural curiosity, while always returning to Bella's side for security and comfort. The crisis came without warning on a scorching afternoon in late September. Marcus had expanded the cubs' living space to include a fenced outdoor area where they could experience natural sunlight and fresh air under Bella's supervision. At nearly 3 months old, Koda and Zara had grown significantly. Koda now weighed 15 pounds, while Zara had reached 12 pounds. Their natural leopard instincts were becoming increasingly apparent. That day, a delivery truck arrived with Marcus's monthly supply run. The driver, unfamiliar with the property, left the main gate partially open when he departed. Marcus didn't notice the security breach until he heard Bella's frantic barking from the outdoor enclosure. Koda had squeezed through a gap in the fencing that had seemed too small for his growing frame. The young leopard, driven by curiosity and emerging hunting instincts, had wandered toward the forest edge where a family of ground squirrels had caught his attention. For the first time since his rescue, Koda was acting purely on leopard instincts rather than the learned behaviors from his life with Bella. Bella's distress was immediate and intense. She paced frantically along the fence line, whining and barking with an urgency Marcus had never heard before. Her maternal programming was in overdrive. One of her adopted cubs was in potential danger, and every instinct demanded she protect him. Fracturing, revealing the fundamental biological differences that could never be completely overcome. Marcus watched in growing alarm as the standoff continued, knowing that one wrong move could shatter everything they had built together. The tension in the forest clearing was palpable as Marcus approached slowly, his heart pounding with the fear that months of careful bonding might unravel in a single moment. Koda remained crouched in his hunting stance, ember eyes fixed on Bella with an intensity that spoke to awakening predatory instincts. Bella stood frozen, her maternal confidence shaken by this first real rejection from the cub she had raised as her own. Then Zara appeared at the edge of the clearing, having followed them through the open gate. The smaller female cub moved with purpose, walking directly between Koda and Bella without hesitation. Her presence seemed to break the spell of territorial aggression that had overtaken her brother. Zara approached Koda calmly, touching her nose to his in the gentle greeting they had shared countless times in their protected environment. The transformation in Koda was immediate and profound. The rigid tension left his body as Zara's familiar scent and touch reconnected him to his adopted family bonds. His ears shifted forward, the aggressive posture melting away as he remembered where his true loyalties lay. He looked toward Bella with what could only be described as uncertainty, as if seeking forgiveness for his momentary wildness. Bella's response revealed the depth of her unconditional love. Instead of maintaining her distance, she approached Koda slowly, her body language conveying reassurance rather than dominance. When she reached him, she began the gentle grooming behavior that had comforted him since his first day of rescue. Koda submitted to her ministrations, leaning into her familiar touch with visible relief. What followed was even more remarkable. Koda began exhibiting behavior that Marcus had never witnessed before. The young leopard started grooming Bella in return, his rough tongue carefully cleaning her ears and face. This mutual grooming represented something beyond simple reconciliation. It was an active choice to maintain their bond despite the pull of natural instincts. The three animals formed a close huddle in the forest clearing, with Zara nestled between Bella and Koda. The family unit had been tested by the fundamental forces of nature and emerged stronger. Marcus realized he was witnessing something unprecedented: the conscious decision of a wild animal to choose learned love over genetic programming. 2 years later, the transformation of Marcus's remote property had become legendary among wildlife researchers and conservationists across East Africa. Dr. Elena Vasquez from the Kenyan Wildlife Service had established a research station just 5 miles away, dedicated entirely to studying the unprecedented family dynamic that had developed between Bella and the now adult leopards. Koda had grown into a magnificent 140-pound male leopard, his golden coat marked with the distinctive rosettes that made him a stunning example of his species. Zara, though smaller at 90 pounds, possessed an elegance and intelligence that captivated everyone who observed her. Yet despite their impressive size and obvious wild capabilities, both leopards maintained an unbreakable bond with Bella, who at 8 years old had become something of a celebrity in wildlife rehabilitation circles. The expanded compound now featured multiple interconnected enclosures spanning 15 acres, allowing the family to roam freely while maintaining security. Marcus had partnered with international conservation organizations to create what experts were calling a revolution in cross-species rehabilitation. Funding from wildlife foundations enabled him to build proper veterinary facilities, hire specialized staff, and document every aspect of their unique relationship.
The most extraordinary development occurred when Zara reached sexual maturity. Instead of the typical leopard behavior of dispersing to establish her own territory, she chose to remain with her adoptive family. When a wild male leopard began courting her at the territory's edge, Zara's response confounded researchers. She would meet with the male for brief periods, but always returned to Bella's side, refusing to abandon the dog who had raised her. Koda displayed equally remarkable loyalty. During territorial disputes with wild leopards, he consistently protected not just Zara, but Bella as well, treating the aging dog as a pack member worthy of his fierce defense. Video footage of Koda gently carrying Frey back to share with Bella had been viewed millions of times online, inspiring conservation efforts worldwide. Marcus's own transformation paralleled that of his unusual family. The isolated veteran struggling with PTSD had become a sought-after expert on animal behavior and rehabilitation. Universities invited him to lecture on interspecies bonding, while his published research papers were reshaping understanding of mammalian social structures. The compound received hundreds of visitors monthly, from researchers to families seeking inspiration. Each guest witnessed the same miraculous sight: a German Shepherd mix resting peacefully between two fully grown leopards, her adopted children still seeking her comfort and guidance despite their wild heritage. On a golden evening in October, as the African sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Marcus sat on his porch watching a scene that never failed to move him to tears. Bella, now showing her age with graying fur around her muzzle, lay peacefully in the grass while Koda and Zara groomed her with the same gentle care she had shown them as helpless cubs. The sight represented something far greater than an unusual animal friendship. It embodied the truth that love recognizes no boundaries when it comes from a place of genuine need and selfless giving. Bella had saved 2 orphan leopards not because biology programmed her to, but because compassion transcended every natural barrier. Dr. Vasquez's research had documented over 847 instances of protective behavior, mutual grooming, and shared meals between the unlikely family. Their bond had influenced wildlife rehabilitation protocols across 3 continents, proving that healing often comes from the most unexpected sources. Marcus understood now that his own journey paralleled theirs perfectly. Just as Bella had chosen love over instinct, he had chosen purpose over despair. The veteran who came to Kenya seeking isolation from his pain had instead found a mission that gave meaning to his struggles. As darkness settled over the valley, the family moved together toward their evening shelter. Bella walked slowly between her 2 magnificent children, their massive forms moving with careful consideration for her aging pace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new visitors, and new opportunities to share their extraordinary message with the world.